Thank you. Good evening, Toastmasters. Today, I want to talk about my trip to China in 2025 to visit my dad's family. The last time I visited China was in 2019, so it's been 6 years. And for context, my dad is from Suzhou. For those of you who have never heard of Suzhou, it is essentially the San Jose of Shanghai. That is to say, it is the second largest city in the Shanghai metropolitan area. And so what that means is that Suzhou is relatively prosperous. And it's also a pretty well urbanized area. And so there's this famous skyscraper that I got to visit in Suzhou this time, which is called the Gateway to the East. It was built about the time when I was in middle school to high school. And when I was a little kid, when I first visited Suzhou, Suzhou was just this sort of tiny village. I also got to visit other parts of the newly built Suzhou downtown as well, including this pretty interesting hotel that actually looks like a cruise ship. And that was a lot of fun. And of course, every single time I visit China, there's always something new, some improvement. And this time, the improvement from 2019 was the fact that the air quality was much improved. Growing up, I always never really liked going to China because, to quote little me, China was stinky. That's because China smells like, or back then smelled like rotting garbage and smoke. But this time in 2025, the air was remarkably clean. And I think there's two reasons why. The first is that Suzhou now has a fully built out metro system. In 2019, it was just one or two lines, very tiny, but now it has a metro system to make any North American city, minus New York, of course, envious. In addition, there were a number of electric cars that were out in Suzhou. They represented about 1/3 of the cars on the road. This is quite a bit of a shock, considering the last time I went to China, less than 5% of them were electric cars. And some of them were electric cars I've never even heard of, including this very high-tech Neo that I snapped. But enough about what's new in Suzhou and China. What was new in my family? Well, there are a couple of new additions to my family. My dad has three siblings, and so by extension, because of the one-child family law, I have three cousins, and two of those cousins recently had kids. The third is actually pregnant, and she came to visit China, and I got to hang out with both my cousins and the rest of my extended family. And you can see there's this very nice photo of us at dinner. And of course, speaking of food, in China, I got to eat a lot of really good food because food is very central to Chinese culture. And so I got to try out these very nice noodles, these pan-fried dumplings, and yes, even bugs, which taste surprisingly good, like a slightly more mushy French fry that's pretty well seasoned. I also got a drink with my family now that I was of drinking age, and we played the time-honored Chinese drinking game of seeing which family member you can get drunk first. Spoiler alert, it was my dad, not me. I went to American college after all. Speaking of non-alcoholic drinks, I also got to drink the famed Luckin Coffee, but in its hometown. Very new, very hot, and very trendy. And speaking of very old and very trendy things, I also got to visit the ancient city of Suzhou as well. So because Suzhou is on a river delta, it is this ancient canal city. It has been nicknamed the Venice of the East. And so I got to visit famous old towns. And I got to see this very, very beautiful ancient city with my aunts and my grandmother as well. I also got to pay respect to those who have passed on in my family as well. And so I visited both my grandfather and my great-grandfather and grandmother's graves. And I brought food, and we also burned Chinese currency. So what you see on the left-hand side is burning afterlife money. And so in China, the idea is that you burn this bag of paper money, and that gets converted into currency for your ancestors to spend, hopefully wisely, in heaven. And hopefully they also don't suffer from inflation. I'll let you guys think about that as well. But of course, my grandmother is still alive, and I want to spend as much time as possible. In the last 2 days, I went on a walk with her. As I walked across the city, she also pointed out a couple of things worth noting. And one of them was this bridge. This bridge was a bridge that she used to walk across to grab groceries when she was a little girl. But as you can take a look, this bridge no longer spans the entire river. And that's because, going back to the idea that China has developed a lot, they've almost tripled the size of the riverbank. And so that once ancient river bridge that she used as a little girl is now merely a nice piece of decoration. Of course, you can also see the progress of Chinese society represented in the buildings that were being built in the background. But I think the thing that's worth mentioning as I conclude the speech is that really that China is a very new and modern state with these very nice tall buildings you can sort of see in the background, very modern buildings, skyscrapers, but it's also this very old society as well. And it has very strong undercurrents of both the ancient and the new. In particular, this very strong emphasis on family and collectivism and filial piety. I was talking about this with my cousin who is about to have her first kid. She, the third cousin, the one who's pregnant right now, actually immigrated to Australia. And she was asking me what it was like to grow up as an Asian Westerner because her daughter will be Australian American or Asian Australian, that is. And we talked about the differences between the East and the West and how in China, your life was not really your own. Your life was an extension of your family. And by that extension, you were also the extension of the Chinese people and the Chinese state. And that in China, there is this very well-paid path of getting a job, getting married, having kids, and repeating that. And that in the West, things were very different. Neither for the best or the worst, we ultimately concluded. But I think if you want to have your own opinion, I highly recommend you visit China for yourself. Hopefully, this presentation gave you a good overview of my trip, and hopefully for those of you who are Chinese, represented the culture as well. Thank you.